Good hello and welcome back, everyone. Do y'all remember a few videos ago when I reviewed the beast of the Mezozoic Allosaurus? Well, as you may recall, I only had access to that figure because I was commissioned to paint it. And the paint scheme chosen was the one from Planet Dinosaur. Now, before I jump into this, I want to apologize to David Silva and all of the other guys at Beast of the Mesozoic. The coloration you guys chose for your Allosaurus is amazing. And just in general, I love the colors you guys use for your figures. So if you see this video, or see pictures of the finished figure online, just bear in mind, I don't think that I'm fixing something you guys broke. This Allosaurus is spectacular right out of the box. So I saved you guys the tedium of watching me base coat this Allosaurus, and I did that off camera. The long and short of it is I just airbrushed the whole thing with khaki, except for the eyes. Those eyes will work great for the repaint, so there's no need to change them. Now, Beast of the Mesozoic freaking rocks, and even though I'm repainting this Allosaurus, I still want it to retain the same aesthetics that the Beast of the Mesozoic figures have. And part of that means putting a wash on it. So as much as I don't like using washes, we're gonna do it, and hope for the best. This wash is basically just watered down burnt umber. I don't know why I said basically. It is literally just watered down burnt umber. And we are going to use it to cover the entire figure, which is quite messy, as washes are. I've partially disassembled the figure. That way I can get this wash and the rest of the paint into all of those articulation points that would be really difficult if not impossible to get into otherwise. It's also going to help the wash to dry evenly. There's nothing worse than thinking that your wash is dried completely and then having it run out from between a joint and ruin the rest of the paint that you put on the figure. Ask me again why I don't like using washes. To clarify, I don't like using washes, but I certainly enjoy looking at the finished product. They bring out a lot of detail that we'd otherwise miss on the sculpt. But since that wash did cover up all of the khaki that I previously base coated the figure in, we're going to go in now and dry brush all that khaki back on. Just like a wash seeps into all of the recessed areas, dry brushing hits all of the raised areas. And I think that some of the best paint jobs have a combination of washes and dry brushing. Wash for the recessed details and dry brush for the raised details. But dry brushing the whole dinosaur is just as tedious as base coating it. And I didn't save you guys having to watch the dry brush by doing it off camera like I did with the base coat. So, sorry, but I really didn't want to cheat you out of the whole process. So enjoy the extended tedium of dry brushing, and I'll catch you guys when something else interesting happens. Well, after dry brushing for what seemed like forever, I figured it would be a good idea to put the pieces more or less together and make sure that they're all relatively the same color. And yeah, I think we're good, more or less. But now, we've got some counter shading to do. So now I'm going to go in with some warm buff and dry brush all of the areas on the underside of the figure. And the fact that this figure is both highly articulated as well as easy to disassemble and reassemble makes this whole thing a lot easier than it otherwise would be. And similarly to how I just dry brushed all of the undersides of the figure, I'm going to go in now with some classic caramel and I'm going to get the dorsal areas of the figure. Same process, just a different color. Well, that was thrilling, but the counter shading isn't quite as bold as I'd like it to be, So now I'm going to go in and lightly reinforce that counter shading with my airbrush. Just lightly though, I still want to see that wash underneath it. Alrighty, mission accomplished. I'm going to take a quick break here and go on a little bit of a tangent. We're still a long way from done on this repaint, but if I was going for true paleo accuracy, I would stop here. Don't get me wrong, I like stripes, dots, and speckles as much as the next guy. But large animals, particularly large predators, have a tendency to be pretty solid browns and grays. There are exceptions, sure. Tigers come to mind, but they are an exception. We don't see tiger-striped grizzly bears. Now, is it possible that Allosaurus was green with big orange spots? Oh, absolutely. But looking at what we see of extant animals, I think it's most likely that it was shades of brown or gray, and may not have even had any kind of patterning. Its coloration could have looked very much like a lion. I know it's not as interesting as stripes and dots, I just think it's what's probably most likely. But I digress. You're not here to hear my opinions on dinosaur pigmentation and what I think is most accurate. You're here for a Planet Dinosaur repaint. So that's what we're gonna do. Now, let's get started on those stripes and dots. Now, because we don't see jet black in nature very often on animal colorations, what I've actually done here is used black to significantly darken some burnt umber. So what you're seeing that looks black is actually a very, very, very dark brown, like what's actually on most black cats. Now, because I like using a toothpick to paint so much, I'm going to use that to go in and do the patterns on the neck. And we'll just work our way down from the head, the neck, and then onto the body. The Planet Dinosaur Allosaurus is patterned in a series of dark splotches that in some areas are elongated into almost stripes. So I'm going to try to mimic that. I'm also going to give him a couple of freckles on his snoot. Speaking of those splotches forming into stripes in some areas, they are definitely stripy on the tail. So I'm going to go ahead and mark out the spacing for the stripes on the tail, and then drag the stripes down from where I've marked the spacing. And we're going to do that on both sides of the tail, because we don't want a lopsided dinosaur. Once the striping for the tail is in place, I'm going to go ahead and go in and mark out all of the splotches between the tail and the neck. And I'm going to do it at 20 times normal speed because I took my sweet time doing this. And just because I took half an hour doesn't mean you need to stick around for half an hour to watch me do it. Ah, the magic of video editing. It'd be pretty sweet if I could actually paint a dinosaur this fast, and have it not look like complete crap. Having finished the large splotches, I'm going to go in now with a toothpick and do a lot of smaller splotches and speckles to keep all of those big splotches company. Now that I've finished marking all of the patterns on the Allosaurus, I'm going to go in with the airbrush with the same color that I did those splotches and patternings in, and I'm going to go over all of them. That'll give it a much more natural and faded look. Alright, now we're getting to the point of no return. I'm going to start painting the head with dark scarlet. I'm using my airbrush for this because red, especially dark red, is a very unforgiving color, and we want to just go in lightly at first. The goal here with this whole repaint is to still try to make this Allosaurus look like a real animal, and that means faded and muted colors. I know, exceptions exist in the natural world, but I think that the coloration on this Allosaurus is already exceptional enough, so let's not get carried away. You may or may not have noticed I just flexed the neck off to the left. That was so I could get paint in between the joints. I want the patterning and coloration to look the same regardless of how this highly articulated Allosaurus is posed. Alright, we are done with the dark scarlet for now, so we're going to go in with some burnt umber. I'm going to use this burnt umber to lightly spray the back of the neck, torso, and tail, and kind of fade all of the existing colors and patterns into each other. I've just got to be careful not to go too hard on the airbrushing and obscure all of those patterns and colors. Does this coloration strike anyone else as being exceptionally similar to the Jurassic Park 3 Ceratosaurus? I've added a little bit of black to the burnt umber in my airbrush, and now I'm just going in and adding a couple of more splotches and speckles, as well as going over some of the existing patterns a little bit that might have been a little bit too obscured by that burnt umber overspray I did earlier. You may have noticed I just disassembled the Allosaurus again. That was so I could go in and do some airbrushing over the articulated joints that were covered up by overlapping pieces, which I did off camera because it's kind of redundant. But hey, we're back now, so let's paint some claws with some gloss black. So there was absolutely nothing wrong with the gloss black that the Beast of the Mesozoic Allosaurus' claws were already painted in, and I wouldn't be repainting them at all. But they got hit with some overspray from the airbrush. So to fix that, we are painting them after all. But we're painting them exactly how they were before. The inside of the mouth and the eyes were miraculously spared from overspray by putting masking putty over the eyes and keeping the mouth closed. So we don't need to worry about going in and painting those. Which means that once these claws are done, we're going to be ready for some glamour shots.